Assalamu alaikum, Khwateen Hazrat. Welcome to the Ambassador's Lounge. Our special guest today is Ambassador Masood Khalid, a veteran diplomat. Ambassador Masood Khalid has served as Pakistan's envoy in South Korea, in Malaysia, and also in China. In China, he was the longest serving ambassador of Pakistan. Mr. Masood Khalid has been with us a couple of times, and he has shared his thought and information on various issues in South Asia, China, and the Far East. Sir, welcome to the Ambassador's Lounge.
Thank you very much.
ख़वातीन हज़रात, हमारा आज का प्रोग्राम जो है वो इंडिया चाइना रिलेशंस पर है. जैसा कि आप जानते हैं that since 2020 the relations between China and India have hit rock bottom. And amid these rising tensions, the political pundits had feared worst. However, it was because of the far-sightedness and maturity of the leaders of the two countries that tensions started subsiding. Two things happened. एक तो ये है कि the two countries kept their channels open, channels of communication, both political as well as military. That helped in reducing the tensions. Secondly, the trade was allowed to continue. आप देखें कि 2020 में इंडिया चाइना रिलेशंस, इंडिया चाइना जो ट्रेड था, it was around $90 billion, around that figure. But in 2022, it hit $136 billion. Presently, it's about $118 billion, जो कि dip लिया उसने. And in China has also surpassed US as the main or the first trade partner of India. Presently, there is an ongoing debate in India on restructuring, revisiting the relations with China. To discuss, we will be discussing this thing with Ambassador Masood Khalid and related issues. Sir, and I'm joined today in this discussion by Ambassador Riaz Bukhari.
Thank you.
Sir, my first question, opening question to you is that there are reports which indicate that there's a developing in-house debate in India about the need to reset Sino India relations, to make concerted efforts to resume political dialogue. But we do not see actual manifestation of this desire in their policies. Your comments on that, sir?
Thank you very much. I've also seen these reports. And I think, yes, there is an in-house debate going on to review the relations or to reset the relations with China. And primarily it is, I think, on account of the pressure which is coming in from the business community of India. Because as you know, you mentioned the trade, the volume of bilateral trade, which is now $118 billion. And of course, there is a huge trade surplus in favor of China. But China is the largest trading partner. So quite a number of Indian industries are dependent on China. So I think there is a pressure from within the business community of India to soften a little bit on China. And I think in recent weeks, there have been some steps which the Indian government has taken in terms of lifting some restrictions on trade. There were certain tariffs and some other measures. So lately there have been some, movement in that direction. Now, I do not know whether it is tactical or it is strategic. I don't think it is strategic, and we could go on the reasons, as to why I think it is not strategic.
Sir, just continuing with this thing, what are the major divergences in the perceptions of these two countries?
I think this is a very good question. Let's go a little bit into history. When India and China were new countries, 1947 and 1949, there was an empathy in China for India, owing to India's anti-colonial and anti-imperialist struggle. And Chairman Mao Zedong, being a revolutionary, always appreciated and supported such movements. So between Chairman Mao Zedong and Prime Minister Nehru, there was that bonding in the initial stage. And you would recall in 50s, their bilateral relations were described as Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai era. They were so close. Then 1954, Prime Minister Nehru visits for the first time China. He was the first non-communist head of state to visit China. So obviously there was a red carpet welcome and this and that. And there they agreed or defined those principles of peaceful coexistence, which later on were endorsed in Bandung. So that was up to 54, 55. When the insurrection started in Tibet in mid-50s, there the rift started between the two countries, and leading to the fleeing of Dalai Lama and seeking shelter in India in 1959. But within these 4 or 5 years, the drift started, and suspicion by China that India was supporting Tibetan dissidents. And there is some proof, empirical evidence also, that India was supporting, So that is the history. And then from 59, 60 onwards, 60, 61, India and China negotiate the border treaty, fail, despite China's eagerness to settle its border with India. That didn't happen, and then they go to 1962 war. And bear in mind that from 1962 onwards, I think till about 76 or 77, no visit took place. No ambassador was there. No ambassadorial relations. And I think it was 88, if I'm not wrong, that the assassinated Premier of India, Rajiv Gandhi, visited there. So there was a big lull in relationship. So obviously, if you have this kind of a long pause in relationship, then it generates mistrust. So that lack of trust is very much there. It exists very strongly, number one. You talked of the worldview. Yes, both the countries have different worldview. First of all, China and India see differently their roles in Asia and beyond, number one. Number two, now this Indo-Pacific strategy. India is practically in anti-China camp. So obviously their divergences have increased. Number three, I think this you also mentioned, their competition to reach out to global south. India is trying its best to sort of counter Chinese moves or Chinese influence within the global south. Then they have technology related relations with Taiwan. There is also a serious issue between China and India. Then of course Dalai Lama issue. Now there will be a change of Lama, in near future. So that is an issue. And then recently they allowed a high-level congressional delegation from the United States to visit and meet Dalai Lama. So these are all such steps which have created serious differences and mistrust between India and China. Now, bilaterally, of course, they have this issue, the border dispute and the issue of unequal trade. And another, whether you put it in bilateral context or in worldview context, China's relationship with Pakistan. It's a serious irritant in India-China relations. And then of course the BRI where
Yes.
India sees that China is expanding, increasing its influence in this region, and sort of questioning its chaudrahat.
Yes.
Sir, you talk about divergence, of their regional, views as well as global positions. Do you see any convergence developing between the two countries on their worldview as well as the regional, views?
You see, it's very interesting, and on certain issues in multilateral forum, India and China cooperate with each other, especially on the issues pertaining to developing countries' causes and some other issues. But I think China, reached out to India about 5 or 6 years ago, and there was a lot of bonhomie between the two. I think there were, if I'm not wrong, if my memory serves me right, at least 6 to 7 meetings, or probably 8 meetings took place between Prime Minister Modi and bilaterally and on the margins of international conferences, and Xi Jinping. But Chinese, I think, realized that Indians are not budging. And now another point which I think I should highlight here, the divergence in their point of view. For example, China says that the relationship between India and China should not be, a hostage of the border dispute. Okay?
Exactly.
India says, no, stability in our relationship can only come when the border issue is settled.
That's what the foreign minister said.
Yeah, this has been their position, so consistently. So, big divergence.
Yeah.
So, the point is, you are talking about strategic convergence. I don't think there is going to be any strategic convergence, because if you really follow the developments which are taking place in the context of India being a very important actor in the Indo-Pacific strategy, India has moved very fast to institutionalize and to formalize those mechanisms and agreements with the United States, which are of long-term nature. For example, India's, we talk of a net security provider and strategic defense partner for a long time to come. This started from when Condi Rice was the Secretary of State. She wrote a piece in Foreign Affairs. At that time, she said, okay, India, we have to, push India. We have to take India to be a policeman in the region, in the Indian Ocean. That's something to that effect. And then this policy translated into what you are seeing today. So, I think India is a swing state. A lot of, there is a lot of hype about strategic autonomy of India. We also exercise strategic autonomy. Every country does it. But India is, of course, because of its economic profile, economic power, and the support which it is getting from India, from the West, India is in a position to exercise its options more freely. But India swings. Now, India is trying to give this impression to the United States that, look, we are part of Quad, we are part of these mechanisms, agreements, foundational agreements, technology agreement, this and that. But we are a power, ourselves. And we can also deal with China. So, mixed signals. It's a very good diplomacy that way.
Okay.
But it's a mixed signals they give. Time and again. Chanakya. आता है यहाँ पर, ठीक है? हाँ, ये है. तो अब ये है कि इसमें कन्वर्जेंसेस इस वक्त तो मुझे नज़र नहीं आ रही, लेकिन ये है कि I think both sides are keen to have some kind of softening in relationship. So maybe some steps are taken. Border dispute, I don't know whether any headway is being made. I don't think so. And it took China 18 months to send their ambassador to India.
Yes.
A clear signal. So I think the convergence is at least
not in near.
Not.
Sir, in his congratulatory message to Prime Minister Modi, the Chinese PM said that sound and steady development of China-India relations is not only conducive to the well-being of the two peoples, but also injects stability and positive energy into the region and the world. China is willing to work with India to push forward bilateral relations in the right direction. My question is, how far will China go in improving its relations with India?
Well, I think China can take some initiatives to improve its relations, but the problem is that basically the thrust of China's policy a few years ago towards India was to somehow mitigate India's bite against China at the behest of United States, right? That India is a neighbor, big neighbor of China, important economic partner, a big market from which China is earning hard cash, my dear. So, and you know, India has its influence in the non-aligned countries, in West, etc., etc. So China tried to sort of neutralize to an extent that maybe India will engage with us and India will water down its aggressiveness towards China, but that didn't happen. In Chinese perception, India did not come on board. Hence, they said, okay, we'll do Galwan, we'll do, you know, this 2020 clash. And here I would like to give you another anecdote. Dr. Henry Kissinger's book, you know, he has written, I think, about 16 books on China. The chapter, the prologue first, starts with the 1962 India-China war. And he says that Mao Zedong is sitting with his comrades and lieutenants while the two armies are facing a standoff on the border, Indian and Chinese forces. And he is trying to extrapolate and explain to them that, you know, we had a war 1300 years ago, then we had a war 700 years ago between India and China. But then he says, but China is a civilization, India is a civilization, and we can coexist. Following this remark, he says, but I think we have to knock India down so as to bring her onto the negotiating table. So this was the philosophy which was acted upon in 1962. And again, this time around, when Galwan happened, and you know, China has created new facts on ground on their boundary, and I don't think they are going to retreat, because that boundary is not demarcated. There are different versions of history used by China and used by India कि हमारी बाउंड्री ये है, उनकी बाउंड्री ये है. इंडिया जो है वो कहता है कि वो जो ब्रिटिश टाइम में मैकमोहन लाइन वो हुई थी वो उसका पैरामीटर है, इनका पैरामीटर है जो इंपीरियल टाइम से हुआ था. तो बिल्कुल डाइवर्जेंस है. अब अगर चाइना ने अगर इफ इट हैज़ कैप्चर्ड 1000 kilometers square kilometers of area of India, whether it's going to agree to withdraw from there and lose a strategic advantage in Ladakh region, which is very sensitive militarily, strategically. So these are the question marks. अब अगर ये बाउंड्री पे कोई solution नहीं होता, तो then what else? Trade is not going to get into India's favor overnight, right? That is not likely. With China has 150 countries are trading partners of China, and most of them have a trade deficit with China because of this huge, the scale of Chinese economy, right? So India is no exception. तो क्या होगा फिर, मतलब what else? थोड़ी सी ट्रेड रेड में जो नेगोशिएशंस में वो होते हैं कि कंसेशंस दे दिए जाएं, ये हो सकता है. दैन पीपल टू पीपल कॉन्टेक्ट्स बढ़ा दिए जाएं, थिंक टैंक्स के कॉन्टेक्ट्स बढ़ा दिए, इस तरह की चीज़ें. So I think there are many a slip between the cup and the lip.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Sir, do you see any thought coming in their relationship? If so, would it be just a tactical, or it will bring some structural shift in their bilateral relationship?
I don't think that as long as India is a partner of the United States in this mega Indo-Pacific strategy.
Yeah.
And I don't have the time, I can explain to you how much deeply involved India is, which is of course a threat to our security also, with the United States. And now it's a Western project. Propping up India in this region is a Western project. It's an American project to prop up India as a policeman. So Americans कहते हैं कि ये एक लॉन्ग टर्म प्रोजेक्ट है हमारा इंडिया के साथ जो हमारे ताल्लुकात हैं. सो आप इसको इस तनाज़र में इस बैकग्राउंड में देखिए ना, तो एकदम कैसे ओवरनाइट चेंज हो जाएगा. अब मैं अगर आपके साथ मुआहदे करता चला जाऊँ लीगली बाइंडिंग, और उसके बाद एकदम मैं आपको कह दूँ कि बुखारी साहब मैं तो इनको मानते ही नहीं, तो फिर तो एक बहुत बड़ा झगड़ा शुरू हो जाएगा ना, फिर आप मुझे कोर्ट में ले जाएंगे. ठीक है, इसी तरह ही है वहाँ पर भी. तो एक एब्रप्ट कोई रप्चर तो नहीं होगा. और फिर दूसरा ये कि यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स वुड नॉट लाइक इंडिया टू मेक ए मेजर रिट्रीट, यू नो, ओवरनाइट. अगर मैं तो कहता हूँ कि अगर ये हो जाए तो ये तो एक बड़ी अच्छी डेवलपमेंट है, पॉजिटिव डेवलपमेंट फॉर आवर रीजन. India being the largest country in terms of population, China second largest, two big major economies, Pakistan in the center, being a bridgehead and looking towards, you know, our western neighborhood in terms of promoting regionalism. There are great opportunities if their relations are good, China and India का मसला क्या है? India wants access to Central Asia and Afghanistan through Pakistan, but it is hard-headed. वो hubris है ना, and arrogance है, big power. इनको दरअसल जिसको कहते हैं ना नई नई ये है नुवरीश, इनको नई नई ताकत मिली है तो ये उसकी डिमॉन्स्ट्रेशन कर रहे हैं. तो मेरा ख्याल है it will अभी.
Sir, both China and India, they are competing for the attention of the global South. They are projecting images of benign power, developing trade, for example, with Africa. How do you see their rivalry developing in this context? One thing. Second thing, can they come up with a consensus of what are the major issues confronting the developing countries?
Well, right now, China is holding a 3-day summit with African countries, and it's a big event there.
Exactly.
Number two, China's footprint in Africa is much bigger than India.
Exactly.
Actually, India, seeing that China has entered Africa, so India also followed suit.
Absolutely.
But because of the scale and the capacity of China to do these projects under BRI and, you know, to help countries in the global south, obviously its influence and clout is much bigger than India. And if you would recall, this global south thing, if I am not wrong, suddenly India got this idea that we should be the champion.
Exactly.
And this was, I think, during this
Summit.
G20 summit, right?
Yeah.
Before that, you did not hear much on India's role being
as a leader of the global south.
But though India has, you know, fairly good influence because of the non-aligned policies of the past in Africa and developing countries, India is well regarded. I mean, give the devil its due. But in terms of projects, in terms of economic footprint, economic influence, China still has, I think, a larger capacity. So this competition will continue. Let's see what happens. But I think the constraint on China will be this squeeze which the West is trying to, conjure or manufacture around China. That China is being ringed around, and, you know, economy, technological sanctions, trade sanctions, and militarily, you know, in South China Sea, etc. So let's see. It's
Yes.
Sir, India considers regional, you know, countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Nepal, Maldives as its area of influence. However, China is also making major inroads in these countries and the region, denting Indian influence. What is the motivating, you know, force behind China to enter into a collision course against India in this region?
No, their competition is ongoing in different theatres, including in South Asia, and of course Pakistan is also, feeling a fallout of that. We are actually in a triangular, conflictual situation. We get squeezed because of US-China tussle, India-China tussle, and Pakistan-India tussle. So we are somehow sandwiched in between. But coming to your question, of course, in South Asia, you see a lot is going on in Indian Ocean.
Yeah.
China wants to secure its flags in South China Sea, Taiwan Strait. Taiwan is, of course, their red line. But South China Sea, from where 80 to 90% of their trade and energy supplies come, through the Malacca Strait. If the Malacca Strait is blocked, China's economy will cripple, okay, or will be badly affected. That is why China is working on these multiple routes and multiple connectivity projects to have alternate routes. Now, in Indian Ocean, in the last 7 or 8 years, there has been increased, competition, military competition, naval competition, and India has also enhanced its presence. They have Nicobar and Andaman Islands. And I was reading today an article where an American Atlantic Council, very bold recommendations they have made to US administration. They were saying that America should collaborate with India to get Andaman Island. So all this is going on. China cannot let this pass. And China has its own relationship with South Asian countries, of course, apart from Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Maldives. So there is a competition, no doubt about that. जहाँ इंडिया जाता है वहाँ चाइना भी पहुँच जाता है, और वो उसमें लॉजिस्टिक फैसिलिटीज़ की भी बात हो रही है. मतलब म्यांमार के साथ दे हैव गुड रिलेशंस, सो दे आर बिल्डिंग इन ए बेस देयर. कंबोडिया में भी शायद कर रहे हैं,
बांग्लादेश में भी ट्राई कर रहे हैं, मालदीव्स में तो उन्होंने काफ़ी.
तो ये कंपटीशन रहेगा साउथ एशिया में. बट going back to your question, why it started? It started because of India's decision to join the American camp as part of the Indo-Pacific strategy. Very simple. And now they have accelerated and increased their collaboration with the West. And it's not only United States. All the Western countries are supporting India, and countries like Japan.
Australia.
We haven't seen a Japanese Prime Minister visiting Pakistan for many, many years now. Although at one point in time, our relationship with Japan was very close. But India, of course, they visit.
ये इसका दूसरा, the question which Riaz asked, these countries which Riaz was talking about, Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, they are naturally they come naturally under the influence of India. Geographical proximity भी है, cultural proximity भी है. Now, how are these countries accepting this Chinese influence? Are they exercising policy options, or and then second question is, how is India responding to this greater China engagement in its continental neighborhood?
Of course, India is not happy or delighted about it, China's inroads. But you see, basically, India cannot do what China has done. For example, with Maldives, Muizu made a somersault, and then immediately Jaishankar visited Maldives last month, yes. I think. Yeah? So where China goes, India also goes. So this is the type of competition which is going on, and this is a geostrategic competition. You should analyze it. It's not, and in the context of economic help, of course, China has, as I said earlier, more capacity to help Sri Lanka and Maldives, and Bhutan is, of course, they have a border issue with Bhutan, which they are trying to settle. India is, by the way, I think India's role as a regional policeman is not endorsed by these small South Asian countries. They accept it because they can't do anything about it. countries like Nepal, Sri Lanka, even Bangladesh. There is, of course, in Bangladesh there was a divide. But Nepal, Sri Lanka, Maldives, all these countries, when you talk to their diplomats, their ambassadors, privately they tell you that we are very uncomfortable with India because they bully. And there are many examples. For example, Nepal ambassador in China, when I was there, he told me, he was a good friend, and he told me, कहते हमें कुछ नहीं करने देते ये, हम वहाँ कनेक्टिविटी का प्रोजेक्ट करने चाह रहे थे चीन के साथ, इन्होंने उसमें रोड ब्लॉक्स क्रिएट किए, तो बुली करते हैं, प्रेशराइज। फिर नेपाल को आपने देखा, वो बॉर्डर का उन्होंने किया, जो इंग्रेस किया था। तो ये इशू है ना, तो इंडिया you can't do anything about it because India is the biggest country of South Asia and it exists, it's there, close geographic proximity and cultural influence or whatever you said. But at the same time, they resent this role. Now, Pakistan is the only country which has, resisted India's hegemonic, sort of designs and expansionism.
Yes.
Sir, इंडिया की बड़ी स्ट्रॉन्ग रिलेशनशिप रही है रशिया के साथ, यूएस के साथ बड़ा स्ट्रॉन्ग रिलेशनशिप डेवलप हो रहा है, जिसका आपने जिक्र भी किया। चाइना के साथ ट्रेड को देखें और इकोनॉमिक रिलेशन देखें तो बड़े साउंड फुटिंग पे हैं। तो इस बैकग्राउंड में डू यू सी एनी लॉन्ग टर्म जितान डेवलपिंग अगेन बिटवीन द यूएस एंड इंडिया? What are the limits on their relationship? Will India participate in hostilities between US and China over Taiwan? Will US put its boots on Indian soil in case of hostilities more developing?
For facilities sake ना पहले 2 सवाल आप कर ले, 4-5 हो गए प्लीज।
मतलब there are more so many।
नहीं, वो जो 2-3 आप 4 क्लब किए ना,
हैं कोई,
ताकि मैं पहले उसका जवाब दे।
रशिया के साथ जो इनकी रिलेशनशिप है उनको सामने रखते हुए,
ठीक है,
यूएस के साथ जो इनका रिलेशनशिप है, इसका फ्यूचर आप कैसे देखते हैं?
देखिए जी, फ्यूचर प्रेडिक्ट करना तो बड़ा मुश्किल काम है, आई थिंक वन शुड नॉट ट्राई टू डू दैट। One can only follow trends, make some, try to make the sense out of it, right?
Okay.
अब रशिया के साथ देखिए, रशिया के साथ बड़ी पुरानी रिलेशनशिप है इंडिया की, बट प्राइमरीली क्या रिलेशनशिप थी? डिफेंस, ऑफ कोर्स,
मोस्टली
मेन स्टे ऑफ इंडिया अभी भी जो है। अब वेस्टर्न वेपनरी आनी शुरू हुई है, लेकिन 50% से ज़्यादा मेरा ख्याल जो है ना अभी भी रूसी असला है, 60% के करीब। अच्छा, नंबर 1। अब रशिया जो है उसकी कैपेसिटी तो नहीं है, रशिया अब जो यूक्रेन वॉर में फंसा हुआ है तो वो सप्लाईज की प्रॉब्लम उनको हो रही है इंडिया को, ठीक है जी। तो इंडिया ऑफ कोर्स नाउ हैज़ द लिक्विडिटी एंड द कैश एंड इट डज नॉट फेस एनी रिस्ट्रिक्शंस टू बाय एनी आर्म्स फ्रॉम एनीवेयर लाइक पाकिस्तान डज। तो इंडिया जो है वो ख़रीद सकता है चीज़ें, ठीक है, अपने लिए, अपनी फ़ौज के लिए, लेकिन साथ उसको ये पता है कि अब रशिया की जो कैपेसिटी है एज ए सिक्योर एंड स्टेबल सप्लायर, वो अभी उस पर क्वेश्चन मार्क आ गया। नंबर 2, रशिया की इकोनॉमिक कैपेसिटी तो बहुत कम है, ठीक है। चाइना की कैपेसिटी है जिसके साथ उनकी लड़ाई है। अच्छा, लेकिन अब आप डबल स्टैंडर्ड्स देखें, ये भी मैं आपको बता रहा, इट्स ए स्विंग स्टेट एंड इट गेट्स अवे विद इट। द वेस्ट टर्न्स ए ब्लाइंड आई। रशिया से तेल ले रहे हैं और उस तेल को रिफाइन करके यूरोप में बेच रहे हैं।
एग्जैक्टली, बिल्कुल।
तो अमेरिका कहता है ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं, हम सैंक्शंस नहीं लगाते, ठीक है, रशिया के ऊपर। पाकिस्तान को वो कहते हैं अगर आपने गैस पाइपलाइन बना ली ईरान के साथ तो हम तो सैंक्शंस लगाएंगे। तो ये है ना डबल स्टैंडर्ड्स एंड डुअलिटी ऑफ पॉलिसी। एक तरफ बिल्कुल कुछ नहीं है, दूसरी तरफ हर कुछ आप जो मर्जी किए जाए। तो ये सर, ये डेप्थ है इंडो पैसिफिक स्ट्रैटेजी की, जिससे इंडिया फ़ायदा उठा रहा है। अब आपका अगला क्या सवाल था?
अगला सर ये है कि
कन्वर्जेंस डेटांत होगा कि नहीं होगा?
जी,
किस में?
मतलब इनके जो ग्लोबल इनके
डेटांत बिटवीन
यूएस एंड इंडिया विल इट कंटिन्यू, विल फर्दर
व्हाट एक्सटेंट यूएस एंड चाइना?
ऑब्वियसली
देखिए, दे हैव टू मैनेज देयर रिलेशनशिप। I think China is very keen to manage its relations because China doesn't have an edge in this competition.
Okay.
Okay? There is still a deficit. Yes, it is the second largest economy, but in terms of overall capability, China is still behind United States, right?
Okay.
But it's catching up. So don't be surprised by different things they do in different domains, in the domain of technology, defense, AI, economy, etc. So don't be surprised because Chinese are very resilient people, so they can give you a surprise. But right now, in terms of power metrics, United States is of course, a superpower, and then it is aligning rather like-minded countries and coalition partners to make a coalition against China. So China is facing pressure not only from the United States but from a combine of countries. So China is keen to manage this relationship, and because Chinese तो कहते हैं ना कि we want to have, this world is too big for both of us to coexist and have win-win kind of propositions. वो cooperation, coexistence की बात करते हैं, वो कहते हैं हम conflict confrontation पे नहीं जाना चाहते. लेकिन अमेरिका जो है, मेरा अपना ख्याल है कि अमेरिका ने ये फील किया कि उनकी तरफ से ट्रम्प एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन एंड देन द बाइडेन एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन विच फॉलोड मोर और लेस ट्रम्प्स पॉलिसी vis-a-vis चाइना, उन्होंने ये फील किया, उन्होंने परसीव किया कि ये चाइना के साथ जो है ना चीज़ आगे नहीं बढ़ रही, क्योंकि दे रेजिस्ट एंड दे फायर बैक. सो अब इन रिसेंट मंथ्स सैन फ्रांसिस्को समिट हुई, अभी ये क्या है अपना सेक्रेटरी ऑफ स्टेट गया था, अभी जैक सुलिवन गया है. तो दे आर ट्राइंग टू सॉर्ट ऑफ रीच आउट टू चाइना, लेट्स हैव सम काइंड ऑफ normalcy in relationship. Now elections are taking place in USA in November, so you can't predict anything what will happen because Trump is a very mercurial person, you can't predict anything. अगर वो आ जाता है, बाइडेन अगर ये कमाला आ जाती है तो इसमें ये तो मोर और लेस इसी किस्म की पॉलिसी कंटिन्यूएशन होगी, तो वन कांट से. बट मुझे जो ख़तरा है, मतलब मे बी आई एम रॉन्ग, इट इज़ आप जैसे कह रहे हैं प्रिडिक्ट करें, फोकास्ट करें, फोकास्ट तो कोई नहीं कर सकता, लेकिन जो कुछ हो रहा है ना इस वक्त साउथ चाइना सी में, प्रोवोकेशंस एंड प्रॉपिंग रीजनल कंट्रीज आर बीइंग प्रॉप्ड अप, तो ये कोई एक्सीडेंटल, कोई मिस कैलकुलेशन या एक्सीडेंटल कोलिजन ना हो जाए.
So in such a collision, where do you see India standing?
हाँ, it's a very good question. India is being a swing state, it will stay aloof. This is what I think. India will not, given the thrashing which India got in 1962 and then 2020, once China settles, even if there is hypothetically, we hope nothing happens like that, but if there is a collision, एक स्किर्मिश होती है, कोलिजन हो सकता है. स्किर्मिश हो जाए तो वो तो मैनेज हो जाएगी, लेकिन कोलिजन हो जाए, ताइवान बीइंग रेड लाइन, कोलिजन हो जाए तो उसमें इंडिया तो मेरा नहीं ख्याल कि अपने कोई भेजेगा. ये कर सकता है कि फोर्सेस उन्होंने ऑलरेडी बॉर्डर के ऊपर बहुत ज़्यादा री एनफोर्स कर दिए, दोनों ने, चाइना ने भी और LAC के ऊपर इंडिया ने भी, और इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बना रहे हैं. बट द पॉइंट इज़ के वेदर इंडिया विल मोबिलाइज इस फोर्सेज और कुछ शिप्स भेज देगा दो चार ऐसी, और शो ऑफ फोर्स जिसको कहते हैं ना, इंडियन ओशन में उधर भेज देगा डराने वराने के लिए. लेकिन अगर कोई ऐसी उन्होंने की कि कोई ऐसा स्टेप लिया मिलिटरीली, तो वो तो मेरा ख्याल है once China settles then again come back.
So what you are saying is there are limits to their relationship.
Absolutely.
That is, India will not participate in any hostility between US and China, जैसे आपने कहा over Taiwan. And similarly, as he said, with the US will you will not put boots on ground if India has any carries on any hostility. Sir, मुझे ये बताइए, is raison d'être of India-US relations only China? I mean, are there any other components, and what are the shared values and common interests?
Values, well, you can talk of democracy, language, huge diaspora in the United States, which is now playing a key role in American politics, in American administration, in American Congress, and American business. And Modi is capitalizing on that. Prime Minister Modi is getting technology from the West, economic assistance from the West, military assistance from the West. On the basis of these components, which are very important, and they are capitalizing. America is supporting India for its own interest, right? Other than China, United States still has that, it's a superpower, no doubt, but unipolar movement is coming to an end. There's no doubt about that, right? But it's still a superpower till it is finally challenged. So it has a worldview of being everywhere in the world. So when it looks India, it looks at India and its role in the Indian Ocean to counter China, to check on China, right? Secondly, India, you can say that extras, what are the extras of this relationship? India has good influence in Middle East. India has good influence in Africa. So wherever, can you give me the reason when China reached out to Pacific countries, and in the Pacific region, except I think 3 countries, rest of them have relationship with People's Republic of China and not Taiwan. As soon as that happened, United States reached out to Pacific countries.
Islands.
India reached out to Pacific countries. Modi went to Papua New Guinea and few other countries.
All those islands there.
So ये competition है ना?
बिल्कुल.
तो इसमें ये एक्स्ट्राज हैं जो मैं आपको कह रहा हूँ कि उसमें एक्स्ट्राज में ये फ़ायदा है कि भाई अगर इंडिया के साथ ताल्लुकात हैं तो इंडिया का इन्फ्लुएंस हम भी उसको पिगी बैक करेंगे और इस्तेमाल करेंगे. तो इंडिया के साथ ताल्लुकात जो हैं हमारे ओवरऑल इंटरेस्ट में हैं. ये फ्रेमवर्क बनता है.
सर एक बात मेरी तरफ से तो लास्ट क्वेश्चन ही है. China has surpassed US as the largest trading partner of India. Despite India has border issues with China and other differences and divergence of views on regional and global issues. Is there any lesson for us given our disputes with India and Indian position on CPEC?
देखिए हम तो खुद we want to have peaceful relations with India. ठीक है? There is a historical legacy between Pakistan and India which is not easy to bury. ठीक है? We have serious disputes. Kashmir tops the agenda and then we have host of other issues. आपको पता है सियाचिन है, सिर क्रीक है, ट्रेड इश्यूज हैं, ठीक है, उस पर किसी पे प्रोग्रेस नहीं है. जो थोड़ी बहुत प्रोग्रेस हुई थी वो भी आगे नहीं चल सकी. और इतना ये we lack trust in each other so much that even the normal relations, what to talk of trade, are not there. Our relations are frozen. So this is not a good, not a good thing for South Asia. India being the largest, Pakistan number 2.
Yeah.
An important country, Pakistan is an important country in South Asian equation by any metric. So is India. तो ये peaceful relations जो हैं ये तो पाकिस्तान के इंटरेस्ट में हैं और हमें इसके लिए स्ट्राइव करना चाहिए. और मेरा ख्याल है कि इस वक्त हमारी कोशिश भी ये है कि अगर इंडिया के साथ ताल्लुकात बेहतरी की तरफ जाएं या उसमें कोई आइस ब्रेकिंग हो तो वो अच्छा होगा. लेकिन देखिए ना कि इंडिया का जो इस वक्त एटीट्यूड है वो तो बड़ा एरोगेंट है. इंडिया ने तो देखिए ना एक मंत्रा उन्होंने बनाया हुआ है टेररिज्म का, जहाँ के उनके अपने जो मिलिट्री हेड्स हैं उन्होंने खुद पब्लिकली ये कहा है कि इस किस्म की कोई ऐसी मैसिव इन्फिल्ट्रेशन नहीं हो रही जो पाकिस्तान की तरफ से हो रही. यानी कि ये रिकॉर्ड पे हैं. तो एक मंत्रा है टू मलाइन पाकिस्तान, टू अंडरमाइन आवर इंटरेस्ट. हर चीज़ पे वो ये करते हैं. पाकिस्तान अगर 2 जहाज़ ले ले किसी से, स्वीडन से ले ले तो वो स्वीडन के पास पहुंच जाएंगे कि आप क्या कर रहे हैं। तो हर लेवल के ऊपर, हर स्टेज के ऊपर पाकिस्तान को ये फेस करना पड़ता है फ्रॉम इट्स बिगर नेबर। माई ओन व्यू इज दैट दिस पॉलिसी ऑफ इंडिया is of course opportunistic and maybe not sustainable over a long period of time. अभी मुझे ये भी लगता है कि मे बी आई एम रॉन्ग, आई डोंट नो, कि इंडिया भी चाहता है कि कोई फेस सेविंग हो पाकिस्तान के साथ, लेकिन उसके आसार अभी नज़र नहीं आ रहे। ये जो SCO की समिट आ रही है हमारे यहाँ, इसमें आपको एक इंडिकेशन मिल जाएगी, क्योंकि जो इलेक्शन में उन्होंने पाकिस्तान को रगड़ा दिया है अपने बयानात में, कारगिल में जो उन्होंने जाके बात की है पाकिस्तान के ख़िलाफ़, तो उससे तो कोई यही अंदाज़ा होता है कि अभी इंडिया किसी मूड में नहीं है। और अभी जयशंकर ने जो बयान दिया है, तो अब देखते हैं कि उनकी नुमाइंदगी किस लेवल के ऊपर इस समिट में होती है। वो एक इम्पॉर्टेंट इंडिकेटर सिग्नल होगा पाकिस्तान के लिए। तो देखिए क्या होता है, लेकिन हमारी तो कोशिश यही होनी चाहिए कि हम आगे बढ़ें। जो कश्मीर का मसला है उस पर भी हम डायलॉग करना चाहते हैं कि आप बैठ के बात करें। इट्स बेसिकली इन्वॉल्व्स द डेस्टिनी ऑफ द कश्मीरी पीपल। पाकिस्तान और इंडिया को तो आप साइड पे कर देना, द कश्मीरी पीपल आर सफरिंग। तो अगर कोई सोल्यूशन इसका निकल आए एमिकेबल, जो कि एक ज़माने में कोशिश की गई थी, तो दैट विल बी गुड फॉर द पीस एंड स्टेबिलिटी of South Asia, for CPAC, for BRI, for India's own connectivity with this region. अभी वो चाहे बाहर से जा रहा है, अभी कहीं से जा रहा है, उधर से जा रहा है, doesn't make any sense to me.
Right, sir. Sir, thank you very much. आपने बिल्कुल सही कहा। It seems that India की पॉलिसी ये है कि जो उससे ज़्यादा स्ट्रॉन्ग है चाइना, मूव टूवर्ड्स देम, अगर आपको झुकना भी पड़े झुक जाएं, बट व्हेन इट कम्स टू अदर रीजनल कंट्रीज़ लाइक पाकिस्तान और छोटे मुल्क जो भी हैं, ट्राई टू सप्रेस देम, उनको प्रेशराइज करें।
जी।
तो इसमें सिंस 2020 आपने बताया कि इंडिया हैज़ अ सीरीज़, जो इनके ताल्लुकात थे दे वेंट ऑल टाइम लो, और लेकिन उसके बावजूद जो इंडिया की पॉलिसी है इट वाज हाईली एंटी चाइना। आप देखिए देयर वाज वीज़ा जो इशूएंस थी वो सस्पेंड कर दिया, फिर दे prevented people to people contacts, they prevented Chinese companies from operating in India, and for me the most atrocious thing was the outburst. They encouraged the outbursts of Indian media against China. So there are no positive indications of the shift in India's foreign policy despite what आपने जैसा बताया कि उनके बिजनेसमैन हैं और सिविल सोसाइटी है, दे वांट नॉर्मलाइजेशन ऑफ रिलेशंस विद इंडिया. इन फैक्ट व्हाट वी सी इज दैट इंडियाज स्टैंस टुवर्ड्स चाइना इज हार्डन. दे वांट चाइना टू गिव मोर, पर्टिकुलरली जो जयशंकर साहब हैं, हिज एंटी चाइना पॉलिसी इज नोन एंड ही हैज़ बीन रिटेन्ड इन द सेकंड this is would be he's the second tenure. So India's के जो उन्होंने कहा नेबरहुड फर्स्ट पॉलिसी, दैट इज़ ऑल्सो वी सी इट लैक्स क्रेडिबिलिटी. आप बांग्लादेश में देख सकते हैं, मालदीव्स में देख सकते हैं. सो दीज आर सम ऑफ द थिंग्स विच आर हैपनिंग एंड इंडिया नीड्स टू टेक कॉग्निसेंस ऑफ दीज थिंग्स. It is definitely in its interest to have friendly relations with its neighbors. Let's see what happens. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching Ambassador's Lounge, and we will be back.